It's like the Watergate scandal, except with Watergate, the dirty tricks campaign came to light after the U.S. president had won re-election. And in 1974, you didn't have the internet. Donald Trump, Wednesday, tweeting a profanity and accusing a key opposition lawmaker of treason. In the week since the Democrats formally launched impeachment proceedings, the U.S. president's responded at times with rage. But is it calculated rage? The kind that can get a leader reelected? We'll examine the facts and whether they fly in the court of public opinion. Most Republicans have made it clear it'll take a lot more for them to make Trump the first sitting U.S. president to be ousted while in power. But every day this story seems to snowball. And like during Watergate, there's the alleged crime and then there's the cover-up. Who knew about that phone call to Ukraine's president? In how much trouble are the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the Vice President? Will they take the fall? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking how nasty it's getting in Washington. Joining us, Lex Paulson, who is the newly named director of the School of Collective Intelligence outside of Marrakesh.
Good to be with you.
Thanks for being with us. Thanks as well to welcome back Randy Yallows, attorney, member of Republicans Overseas.
Yes, thank you.
Joining us from Washington, foreign policy consultant Molly McHugh. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
And from Utica, New York, pollster John Zogby, senior analyst at Zogby Strategies. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, thank you. Glad to be here.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yeah, the President of the United States this Thursday, once again, leaning into his opponents, once again asking Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden, and also adding China to the list. This after NBC News picked up a story that Biden's son, Beau Biden, accompanied his father, who was then vice president, on a trip to China. 10 days later, a Chinese private equity fund was founded, in which Beau Biden took a stake after his father left office in 2017.
China should start an investigation into the Bidens, because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine. So I would say that President Zelensky, if it were me, I would recommend that they start an investigation into the Bidens, because nobody has any doubt that they weren't crooked. That was a crooked deal, 100%.
If it were me, he says, Lex Paulson.
Yeah, it's really quite stunning that Donald Trump may actually have to do something for the first time in his life, which is face a consequence. He, up until now, has obviously demonstrated no distinction between his own personal political interest and the interests of the country. And when you stray into asking a foreign leader, asking several foreign leaders, it seems now, to intervene in American politics, he's crossed a line that I think even Republicans are now admitting that is
So is it illegal to do that?
It is not as far, well, it depends how one construes bribery and treason. Certainly helping Russia for the sake of Ukraine could be seen as a treasonous act, given that Russia is a foreign policy opponent. But the more important test here is a political one. High crimes and misdemeanors is the standard in the American Constitution for removing a president from office. It's only happened twice before in American history, and intervening or requesting intervention by a foreign leader in an American election, no Republican has said that this is a defensible act.
Is it okay, Randy Yallows, when the President of the United States asks China and Ukraine to investigate his potential opponent in the general election?
First of all, let's go back to the issue of Ukraine. I don't know, no one cited the issue, but have you looked at the treaty? There's the 1998 treaty. There's for mutual legal assistance between Ukraine and the United States in criminal matters, and entitles the president and others in his government to investigate on any suspected activities of any U.S. nationals. So it provides the right to do so. And so it's part of the things that have been done. And I imagine those are things that have been done. I believe the question, getting back to the misdemeanor, and he's saying, well, he's trying to questions of bribery, etc., or high crimes. We forget that those acts are not defined, and they will only be defined by the House when they decide, after an inquiry, after an investigation, what constitute those different things. And we're not going to get into a 19th century discussion. At those times, there was... foul language was considered as an impeachable act in the 19th century. But I'm just saying that's today was something that was pursued at those times. So what I'm trying to say today is...
But does it surprise you when you hear the President of the United States asking China and Ukraine to investigate his political opponent?
The question of the opportunity or not, the question is today, he is entitled to investigate into, for example, the example of Ukraine. The Chinese issue is something that's new today, so I will not be able to answer because the question is, it's something that's new that's come on the table, and I'd like to properly answer the question. But regarding the issue regarding Ukraine, I think it's pretty clear that he's entitled to do so. And if there is an issue, it will go further. But again, let's look back. What's been happening is that these type of issues have come up when there was a Democratic president. There was also issues of the Republicans were going after Obama, and back and forth. Whenever you have the opposition in power in the House, they try to pressure the president, and it's a political battle that is occurring between the Democrats. Like I said to you, I believe all of this has been established. Once we go back to the issues, look what happened when we looked at it last week. We had a discussion regarding Pelosi's statement on a formal impeachment inquiry. What happened? Within 36 hours, Trump and the American people, rather than turning against him, small donors gave up to $13 million in campaign funds.
But support for the impeachment has gone up 10 points, according to polls.
Polls, it depends which polls you're looking at. So,
right.
So the question is...
Let's talk about polls. John Zogby, at this point in time, how is it going to fly with U.S. citizens, the President of the United States, asking Ukraine and China for help?
And not well. I should say, for impeachment, because even though there has been, in fact, a rise in the number of Americans now, American voters who believe in impeachment. One poll has it at 55%, others have it at a plurality. The fact of the matter is that opposition to impeachment is still at around 45%. And it's hard to impeach a president of the United States when numbers are that high. Remember, in the case of Richard Nixon in the 1970s, he really was not impeached, even with all of the investigations and the evidence, was not impeached until his numbers hit 23% job approval. On the flip side of that, Bill Clinton, he was indeed impeached by the House of Representatives at a time when his numbers were in the high 50s and low 60s. Bottom line here is the one thing I do agree with the previous statement is it depends on the polls you're looking at. And I think even though some of the headlines say that Americans are soaring in their approval of impeachment, it's not there yet. Those are not strong impeachment numbers.
Not strong impeachment numbers. And Molly McHugh, on Wednesday, we heard Donald Trump getting the backing of one world leader, Russian President Vladimir Putin, stating he sees nothing compromising at all in what he's seen. Let's listen to him.
What's so special here? I haven't seen Trump was demanding the compromising evidence from Zelensky during this telephone conversation, and I haven't seen Trump threatening him that the US wouldn't provide any assistance to Ukraine.
Molly McHugh, your reaction to that statement and to the latest remarks by Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, look, the guy you want on your side in tough times like this is not typically Vladimir Putin when you're trying to evade the perception that you may have inappropriate relationships with Vladimir Putin and other dictatorial world leaders who are not necessarily viewed as Democrats. I think, there's been a lot of issues put out in the last few comments, and I think one that's important to address is whatever it is that President Trump seems to have requested from President Zelensky and from now 4 other countries, we're not sure how many others, did not seem to initiate from an official request of mutual legal assistance from the Department of Justice. This came from the president's private attorney, who seemed to be working in a private capacity. This was not through official channels, although later on it seems the attorney general has become engaged in it. And I think that's very important to understand, that this was not an official U.S. investigation through which we requested foreign aid as we would do in normal investigations of our partner countries. This was something totally separate, and I think it's really important to keep that distinct. I think that we see this sort of blurring of the lines of what we view as acceptable, and we've seen the Republican Party in the United States spend the last 2 years saying there's absolutely no evidence that the president has done any of these illegal things, and now it's, well, those things aren't ever illegal, we never said that they were, and it's just getting a little bit comical. And I think the president is in a very difficult position where his defense is now, if I just do it in the open, it won't come back and bite me. It's a pretty big risk to take, and it's pretty clear he's doubling down on all I have to do is win my 25% base to win the election. And that's going to be a big risk for him going forward.
But it brings us back to what we heard John Zogby say a minute ago, Molly, which is that he's still got that core approval rating, which is high enough. And so, again, asking Ukraine one more time and doing it out in the open, it could work as a strategy.
I suppose. I think it's, if you viewed Russia as are you listening as not a serious thing in the first election, it's pretty hard to not understand that he meant it the first time and he means it now. And I think this is the core issue. Asking for foreign aid for electoral gain is in fact illegal in the United States of America. And I don't know why we are choosing to ignore this fact while we add all these details on conspiracies about servers and whatever else is going on. But the core fact of what the president has done is in fact not legal under the American system. And we really need to stay firm on this as we move forward through the next few months.
Randy Yellows?
I enjoy your comment saying that it's illegal. I imagine you've decided what's illegal today. Nothing's been decided what's illegal. What will be decided if there is an illegal, we have to have an inquiry. Already you're deciding what he's done is illegal when they're even having to barely start any investigation. And what's very interesting is Mr. Schiff already had knowledge, and you were talking about Mr. Schiff and why Mr. Trump was so angry about him and he said there was treason, is we're shocked that even before the complaint by the whistleblower went out, he already had information that was leaked to him before even the formal complaint was done. So here we're seeing someone saying that he's doing something illegal when we see from the beginning there's a political maneuver that's being done by
But
the
hang
Democrats.
on, let's pick up on Molly's point. Is it legal or illegal for a U.S. president to ask a foreign leader for help?
Will be decided what's legal or it's not legal. Cannot be decided by us. Only the House can decide once it gets the 50% majority after an inquiry for the impeachment.
I love getting the chance to see the Republicans stonewalling, right in front of my eyes. It's a wonderful experience. No, but what happened with Adam Schiff? Let's correct the record here. The whistleblower came to an intelligence staffer, asked for what he should do, and was said, "Go get your own lawyer and refer to the Inspector General." This was bipartisan reporting on this. They said this is exactly a normal course of events, and Adam Schiff never met the whistleblower, never saw a copy of his complaint. So the idea that Schiff was somehow compromised in this process is bogus, and the reporting on both sides of the aisle backs up
Schiff.
Schiff.
Language here to exchange with us, but like I'm trying to say earlier on, there's a lot of opposition. People don't like Trump for his style because he's rough around the edges, and you don't like maybe the way they're doing things and the way he does things. Okay, but he's the American people have shown that they want Trump.
All right, let's talk about the tone right now, because we were discussing in this very studio last week the way the tone had gotten caustic beyond the pale in the United Kingdom of late. The President of the United States using profanity on Twitter on Wednesday, and again, taking aim at the chair of the House of Representatives Intelligence Committee, calling Democrat Adam Schiff on Twitter a lowlife who should resign.
He should be forced to resign from Congress. Adam Schiff, he's a lowlife. He should be forced to resign. He took a perfect conversation, realized he couldn't read it to Congress because it was perfect. It was a very nice conversation. So he made up a conversation, and he reported it and said it to Congress and to the American people. And it was horrible what he said. And that was supposed to be coming from me, but it was all fabricated. He should resign from office in disgrace. And frankly, they should look at him for treason because he is making up the words of the President of the United States.
So, John Zogby, tell us the truth here. Is this Americans, they see this as entertainment? the Donald Trump, when he puts the word in profanity in capital letters, when he talks about civil war, when he uses that kind of language in the Oval Office, or are they alarmed?
It all depends who you're talking to. Republicans love it. Populists love it. Anyone who's ever felt hurt or humiliated and wants to strike out against bullies, aka the establishment inside the Beltway and so on, they love it. Everyone else seems to hate it. This is what's happened to truth in the United States of America. Each side has their own set of facts and are locked in, and their own definition of truth locked in. Remember, this is the guy, Donald Trump, who ran for president, and every rally that he holds as president on the basis of lock her up against Hillary Clinton on charges that were deemed similar at the time, threatening national security. So when it comes then to him and his behavior, he then lashes out at the establishment, and it does work for him. I have to say, his polling numbers, approval numbers, have actually gone up. Not hugely, but they've gone up. And I want to get back to a point that I didn't develop earlier on when I said it all depends on the polls that you're looking at. There's a new poll out just last night by Reuters that shows the president's approval rating at 41%. That's the lowest in the pack right now of polls that are out. But I deconstructed the poll and discovered that almost half of those in that sample were Democrats, and 36% of that sample were Republicans. That's not the United States of America. Only 11% identified themselves as independents. This is a poll way out of whack.
Way out of whack. We're going to have to, John Zogby, I'm going to have to interrupt you because we have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at the caustic tone and the evidence at hand over in Washington as impeachment proceedings begin to gather steam. We've been talking about how it is a bit like the Watergate scandal. We're talking about it with Lex Paulson, who is the new director of the School of Collective Intelligence outside of Marrakesh, Morocco. We're also with attorney Randy Yallows, member of Republicans Overseas. Joining us from the U.S. Capitol, Molly McHugh, foreign policy consultant, and from Utica, New York, John Zogby, who is the senior analyst at Zogby Strategies. We talk about the Watergate scandal, which began as a break-in at the Democratic Party headquarters in June of 1972. In the end, it resulted in 69 indictments, 48 convictions, and while the wagons circled around a President Nixon, he'd have to resign in August of 1974, which I guess brings us to a segment we could entitle All the President's Men. First off, there's Mike Pompeo coming clean after first talking as if he wasn't on hand for that phone call, the one between Donald Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Charlie James has more.
Even in Italy, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo couldn't escape Washington's impeachment fury. After previously evading questions about a July phone call between U.S. President Donald Trump and his Ukrainian counterpart, the top U.S. diplomat addressed it Wednesday.
As for was I on the phone call, I was on the phone call. It was about helping the Ukrainians to get graft out and corruption outside of their government, and to help now this new government in the Ukraine build a successful, thriving economy.
But Washington is in an uproar over Trump asking Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky for a favor during that same conversation to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter. That phone call sparked impeachment proceedings against the Republican president. Tuesday, Mike Pompeo tried to delay 5 State Department diplomats from providing documents and testimony that could lead to charges against Trump. Democratic leaders warned him against such a move.
We are deeply concerned about Secretary Pompeo's effort now to potentially interfere with witnesses whose testimony is needed before our committee. Any effort by the Secretary, by the President, or anyone else to interfere with the Congress's ability to call before it relevant witnesses will be considered as evidence of obstruction of the lawful functions of Congress.
Democrats have already set up closed-door depositions for 2 officials. Former Special Envoy to Ukraine Kurt Volker is scheduled for Thursday, and ousted U.S. Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch for next week.
And we have had that closed-door deposition by Kurt Volker. But just a minute more about Mike Pompeo. This Thursday, he was at the Vatican. He had an audience with the Pope, along with his wife, part of that 4-day trip to Italy. His top Donald Trump's top diplomat, also visiting his ancestral village in the Abruzzo. And as we saw in Charlie James's report, touring the Colosseum in Rome. Molly McHugh, why is Mike Pompeo in Italy a week after the U.S. Attorney General was there?
It's a pretty good question, although it's nice to have a 4-day junket for no reason, just to go say hi. I think there's a great concern that Pompeo, in particular, has become central to these efforts to cajole foreign governments to participate in the quote-unquote investigation that Rudy Giuliani pushed forward, which is the investigation of a total conspiracy theory which has been pushed in 4chan and other crazy internet chat rooms for the last 3 years, that, in fact, there was no 2016 Russia attack on the United States, that it was all Ukraine or made up or something else. And this is what they're pushing forward. And I think that when Republicans on the Hill and others who are trying to defend the president on what's going on right now try to put it in more normal language, they are ignoring the fact that this is, in fact, a crazy conspiracy theory that came out of the depths of the worst parts of the internet. And now we have at least 2 cabinet officials, plus the president, plus his vice president, engaged in conversations with foreign officials, asking them to find, quote-unquote, information that will help them prove this conspiracy. And I just don't think that the depth of how bizarre and completely insane this is has really sunk in on a lot of people. But that's where we are now. There's no truth to this. It goes completely counter to U.S. intelligence reports and analysis, to Dutch intelligence reports and analysis, to countless other pieces of actual fact and evidence that were gathered about what Russia was doing against the United States in 2016. And you have the president not only just doing his usual cartoon dance that this isn't true, but now actively pushing the rest of his cabinet to engage in this and populate a conspiracy theory before his next election.
So in how much trouble are Mike Pompeo, the Attorney General William Barr, and his personal attorney Rudolph Giuliani?
Well, I think Barr has made it very clear that this is why he's there. This was why he wrote the 28-page memo that got him the job in the first place, sort of showing that he's willing to bend the law to prove the president's theories. He's all in on this, and this is what he's decided to do, and that's where he's going to be. I think for the Giuliani thing is completely bonkers. And I think when you see Giuliani on TV, you see the way he represents himself, you see what he is requesting, you understand the partners that he has engaged in order to enact this quest for information, people who are criminals and have mafia connections and are really shady in Ukraine and other places. You understand that this is just not based in fact. It is a pursuit of nonsense because they want it to be true so badly. And the president also would be glad to find a magical conspiracy that would wave away all the questions that have sat around him since he's taken the White House. But there's just no basis in reality for it. I think Pompeo is a different category, of course, because he isn't, I mean, his job as a cabinet official is not to sit in the United States and do whatever, but he does represent the United States in the world. And when this is something that is apparently at the top of his agenda, it's something that for months the United States has been pursuing with our allies. I can only imagine the extent to which this has been uncomfortable for people as a request to receive, to engage in this type of strange investigation and conspiracy mongering at the request of the United States government. And it will strain our allies the same way that it is straining the department and limiting our ability to conduct diplomacy in the world.
Randy Yellows?
Again, I guess the investigation is done. Our guest has already decided what was the results of the inquiry. But I think if to go look back, again, it's a question of political rivalry. That's the bottom line of it. Look at, again, the whole Russian incident, the Russian inquiry. We had the Democrats pushing for 2 years. At the end, we have the Mueller report. And what happened? Psh. And that's it. The same thing here. It is a political move by the Democrats to try to create some scandal prior to the elections and try to push something against Trump.
So why is Mike Pompeo in Italy right now?
Why wouldn't he be? It's part of his job. He's Secretary of State. I'm not going after him looking at his schedule, what he's going to do, what he's going to speak to the Italians about or to the Vatican about. Are we behind him checking what he's doing? That's his job. He's the Secretary of State. He's acting in his role.
I mean, it's so sad to see what the Republican Party has come to. I worked in Congress. You had Republicans who really did think there was a difference between political rivalry, as you put it, and the American national interest. That it's not that politics is more than just a struggle for power. But the Republicans seem to have forgotten that there is something that America should stand for beyond who has power in the moment. And the fact that Donald Trump couldn't distinguish between his own power and political interest and the interest of the country, it shows that even in this day of relative truth and democratic truth, Republican truth, there are limits to a political strategy that pushes facts beyond what simple facts on a piece of paper.
But not when you listen to John Zogby. He says, the believers believe, and that's it.
What I'm hearing, my former boss, Jim Himes, sits on the Intelligence Committee. And so I have some insight, having worked in Congress, as to what congressmen say in front of the cameras and what they say to each other. And what I've heard is that Republicans actually aren't very happy about what's happening with the president right now, that the Republicans, and you can tell by the way they duck into elevators and refuse to answer questions, that my guess is as soon as Trump actually leaves the White House, Republicans will conveniently forget that he ever existed.
All right, back at the start of last month, Donald Trump canceled a visit to Warsaw to be on hand when Hurricane Dorian hit. Instead, he sent someone who's been mostly out of the limelight over this, his vice president, Mike Pence, who in Trump's stead met with Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky. This was September the 1st. The Washington Post wondering if the vice president will be able to stay out of it now, even if Pence did not sit in on the July 25th phone call to Zelensky. The one official quoted as saying that one of his top advisors was there, that he got a full transcript within hours. And the question is, at this point in time, could the vice president also be tainted by what has happened in that fateful phone call? John Zogby, your thoughts on how the rest of the Republican Party is handling all this?
First of all, there isn't much love that Republican officials have for President Trump. However, they see his numbers. They've seen his numbers among his base. Hovering somewhere between 84%, 90% among Republicans, even higher among self-described conservatives. And they throw their hands up in the air and say, what are we supposed to do? This is our base, and we've got to go along with this fellow. But I think, what we need to address is they're watching and waiting and seeing if at some point there is, a decline in the president's popularity, that some of that base support that he has starts chipping away, though we're not really seeing it yet. Mike Pence, present during the Ukrainian call, a part of this administration, he could be, to dredge up a little bit of history, the Spiro Agnew in this equation. First of all, Mike Pence not as good on his feet, very smooth, not as good on his feet as Donald Trump is, when it comes to push and shove. And he could be an expendable player in this, not so much with the Democrats going after Pence, but Trump and his people going after Pence, with the understanding that, hey, if we can get rid of Mike Pence, next in line to the presidency is Nancy Pelosi. Now let's see how the Democrats play this, and let's see how my base, this is Donald Trump talking, let's see how my base plays this. Do they really want Nancy Pelosi in? This gets very complicated.
And that brings us to another question here. We remember that when Bill Clinton was impeached back in 1998, he set up a separate war room. He kept this firewall between day-to-day workings of the White House and that. There doesn't seem to be a war room this time. Is that just because in the internet age, there's no point in trying to keep stuff secret?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. The power is all right here. Here's the president's war room is on Twitter, and he can reach as he does, millions of people on a daily basis and rev them up, goes out there and speaks and draws, huge crowds, perhaps not as large as he claims those crowds to be, but he does draw huge crowds. And War Room, this is a man who doesn't really use close advisors the way traditional political leaders do.
The reason why
he
you
chews
have
them up and spits them out.
The reason why you have advisors as a politician is so occasionally when you're wrong, you have smart people to tell you and help improve your strategy. The War Room is not about secrecy. The War Room is about strategy. And right now, it's chaos. The story changes. The first day, it's we didn't withhold the military aid. Then we did, but there was nothing wrong with that. And
but trusting his gut got him elected president.
Trusting his gut got him elected president. But there were people who were also around him who were willing to rein him in and have him read a teleprompter. Now there's no one who's even capable of doing that, and it's showing.
You were saying, why is there no war room? I think Trump has been playing with his constituency and saying, I'm putting the cards on the table. There's transparency. He's given the transcripts. He's put things on the table. We haven't seen that in the prior Democratic administrations. There was less transparency. He put things.
But we are waiting for blood inside of the White House because he has said that he wants the name of the person who spoke to the whistleblower, and there could be a lot of acrimony and recrimination coming in.
There's a question of also deciding what is going to be classified and what's not going to be classified, whether it be under the Trump administration, whether it be under the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, or the Bush administration. There's always an issue of what do we consider for national interest to be classified or not classified. And at one point, we were talking about there was an issue and that was going around in the press also regarding servers, whether the information was being saved on secret servers and not. But it was also used by the Obama administration. It was being used by Trump. So both sides use it, and they decide when they believe it's a national interest, they use it to classify.
But why this call? But why this call with Zelensky? Why should that be put under the lock and key of this special server?
There is a lot of adversity that has been occurring and gathering around Trump. Trump is rough around the edges, as I said. People don't like that. And it annoys a lot of people, and his adversaries don't like the way he behaves, and that's the way you might not like the way he addresses his fellow legislators. He may not be the person. That's the way things are done by Mr. Trump. He's from New York. That's the way he's done business in the past. That's the way he's done things in the past. And the Americans love him. That's the way they've done it, and they've chosen him.
John Zogby?
You can't have it both ways because both sides use servers, private servers, against each other as a sign of treason. Trump says lock her up for doing pretty much the same thing. The Democrats are outraged and go to impeachment because of the same thing.
But Trump produced the transcripts. Now, you say that's where his transparency. The question
He didn't produce a transcript, a summary that if you read it out loud, takes about 10 minutes. And he had a 30-minute phone call. So what else did he say in the 20 minutes that's not in that transcript? Look at page 1.
I'd like to see how often. Go back. I love the criticism. We're always saying we're attacking Trump on a daily basis to try to chip away at his popularity with American people.
You said he was transparent. Where's the other 20 minutes of his
see what happened in the prior
conversation?
administration. Have you been able to see the transparency? Look at
don't do the whataboutism.
No. We look at
Where
the
are the 20
period
minutes?
during the Democrats. He was just our dear friend, Mr. Picard, was just explaining to us that Mr. Clinton had a war room and wouldn't separate things from one
Changing
point.
the subject. Changing the subject.
No,
it's
not
indefensible.
changing the subject.
Where's the 20
No.
minutes? Where's the missing 20 minutes?
You've had the transparency. He could have even not wanted. He could have not even given you that part of the transcripts himself. So there is a transparency.
If he's shaking down a foreign leader to interfere in our election, we deserve to know.
All right,
that's what you decided, that everybody was opening the inquiries for Russians. 2 years we were throwing dirt at Trump, and finally what happened? We have the Mueller report, and again, the whole thing's pretty much buried for now.
I smell fear. That's all I can tell.
Oh, right. You may seem that. Look at the American constituency. We'll see who'll win the elections. I think it's a fear of the Democrats.
Where we're in uncharted
If the Mueller report was over and done, if the Mueller report was really over and done and buried, Trump wouldn't be using his entire government apparatus to try to prove it never should have happened in the first place. There was significant evidence in the Mueller report, regardless of other things, that Russia attacked the United States of America in the 2016 elections. And the fact that Trump wants to say that never happened is a huge national security issue for the United States. Trump views the allies of the United States as his adversaries and the adversaries as his allies. And this is the reality in which we're now dealing, in which all of this other discussion is occurring, where Trump, the president of the United States of America, is the one bullying Ukraine to make a peace deal with Russia instead of Putin doing it. I mean, this is absolutely crazy, and yet this is now the circus that we have to deal with every day, is friends like your fellow sitting there with his Republican talking points, trying to make us believe that this is normal and ordinary, when in fact it is not. It is a national crisis and a crisis for America in the world.
All right, just before we go, how's it all going to impact Trump's main rival in the polls? Well, it depends if you ask him.
Now, let me make something clear to Mr. Trump and his hatchet men, and the special interests funding his attacks against me. I'm not going anywhere. You're not going to destroy me, and you're not going to destroy my family. I don't care how much money you spend, Mr. President, or how dirty the attacks get. Trump knows there are no truth in the charges against me.
John Zogby, briefly, Joe Biden, is he going to be tainted by all of this, Ukraine and China now?
Well, he's going to be tainted by those who oppose him already on the progressive left of the party. And the difficulty is, that's an unresolved internal dispute that the Democrats always have over the last 50 years. What it could mean is that if he does indeed get the nomination, that it's harder for the left to come around and support him in the final analysis. Let's put it this way. This certainly is not going to help Joe Biden in any way.
All right, we'll leave it there. I want to thank you, John Zogby, for being with us from Utica, New York. Molly McHugh in Washington, D.C. I also want to thank Randy Yellows and Lex Paulson for being with us. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there. Yes, plenty of talk about this one, as you might expect, of course. But the big question really is this impeachment investigation already having an impact when it comes to support for Donald Trump? And it does seem to be yes. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. Those the deepest in his corner are rallying around him, but others are stepping back a little bit, and that's what Politico is reporting on here. The fact that basically what they describe as his congressional firewall, those people whose votes were really key to him winning in 2016 and would be key to a 2020 victory, are the ones who are actually backing away a little bit from the president with all this talk of impeachment. White women who helped him very much gain power in 2016, his standing with them has fallen since, and now it is tumbling, according to this article. Women voters very much rallying behind Nancy Pelosi's decision to back this impeachment inquiry. That seems to be backed up by a number of polls that are out, have been out since that inquiry was announced. It doesn't end there, though. Although his core remains very solid, it's the independent voters and those college-educated whites who are very much perhaps starting to turn against him. Now, the latest poll out comes from USA Today. And they say these really are perilous times for Donald Trump because they show that the majority or more back impeachment than don't, more back him being convicted and removed by the Senate than don't. But perhaps the most interesting statistic of all is that even among Republicans, the majority overall, 52%, believe that he was abusing his power in trying to influence Ukraine and ask them to investigate Joe Biden. But even among Republicans, 30% do not agree with him doing that and say that it was an abuse of power. So that's 30% of Republican supporters saying that. So it's an interesting one to take a note of. However, those, of course, who support him continue to do so, and he has announced a record campaign haul. The Guardian here talking about the fact that his support really galvanised by the threat of impeachment. He's raised $125 million in the third quarter of this year. And they put that down, at least in part, to a bump in support because he appears beleaguered. Putting those figures into context, though, at this point in 2011, when Barack Obama was running for his second term, he had only raised so much less. I'm just trying to look. He was running. It's more than double the amount that than Barack Obama had at the same point. So he really is raking in a lot of money from those who support him. Some of that cash is going to be going on campaigns like this one, the hashtag KAG 2020, Keep America Great. And this features a series of clips of Democrats all talking about how they don't like impeachment, they don't think it's the way democracy should go. And of course, he's saying this means they want to steal the election from him. It is a very personal fight, as well, of course, as the allegations against Joe Biden and his son. He appears to be targeting very much Adam Schiff, or taking a hatchet to him, as the Daily Beast put it here. He is the head of the House Intelligence Committee, of course, so very much in the firing line. Donald Trump has accused him of lying, of basically faking that whistleblower report. The Daily Beast says this is a classic roll of the dice for the president and his team, saying that Trump has chosen to villainize his investigator in the same way that he did with Robert Mueller, which had a sort of qualified success for him. It's not just the president who is carrying out these kind of attacks. Dan Scavino is the White House Director of Social Media and an assistant to the president. This was retweeted by Donald Trump himself. And of course, the word bull and Adam Schiff, bull Schiff, we all know what they're getting at there. So it does seem to all be getting a little bit childish and certainly extremely personal right now.
All right, many thanks for that, Emma. James, I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.